The wind was thick with grit, the kind that sticks to your teeth and tongue, and makes a whisper feel like thunder. Bitterwind Ridge was the kind of place where people didn't need much to talk about, but when they found something, they chewed it like tobacco. And standing beneath the auction block that August afternoon, barefoot and rail-thin, Clara May Hollis gave them plenty to chew. Her dress clung to her like memory, worn thin in the seams, dirt like bruises along the hem. She stood with her hands folded, eyes fixed on the weather-beaten man in the wide-brimmed hat, his shoulders carrying the sag of too many winters. Wade Callahan. People called him the widow rancher, like sorrow was something you could brand on a man. She didn't flinch when a boy hissed at her from behind the fence, or when a woman tugged her child away like shame might rub off. Her focus never wavered. Wade had just bid on a wiry black mare, lean as sorrow, wild-eyed and all bones. He didn't speak. He never did at these things. He just raised a single finger, and the crowd quieted like they feared what his silence knew. When the gavel fell, Wade turned to go. Clara stepped forward. "I can cook," she said low. "I can bear you children too." It wasn't pleading. It wasn't bold. Just soft. Like a prayer whispered in the back of a broken church. He looked at her then. Really looked. Not like the townsfolk did, like she was something contagious, but like he was trying to place a sound he'd once heard in a dream. His eyes were the color of storm water, and just as hard to read. But he walked past her, boots thudding heavy on the sun-cracked ground. He didn't say a word. That night, the gossip moved faster than wind. At the saloon, someone laughed so hard they spilled whiskey. At the chapel, Pastor Green shook his head with grief thick in his voice. "That girl's been touched by ruin," he told the women's circle. "And now she's chasing good men into sin." Clara slept in the hay behind the apothecary, her back pressed against the warm belly of a pregnant goat. Martha Dunley, the midwife, had left her bread and a chipped teacup of broth. It wasn't kindness, not exactly, just habit. Martha helped what needed helping, no matter how much dirt it wore. Once, Clara had been a voice in the choir. Her daddy had a sweet tooth for whiskey, but raised her on scripture and discipline. That was before the drifter came through, with promises of California skies and a heart full of nothing. She left with him. Came back alone. The baby never made it past the second breath, and Bitterwind Ridge never forgave what it only half understood. She wasn't looking for pity. Only a place to stand that wasn't made of judgment. 2 nights later, Wade found her again. The coyotes had been wailing something awful near his fence line, and he'd gone out with his rifle, expecting a carcass or trouble. Instead, he found her curled in his barn, arm tucked under her head, hair tangled like riverweed. A bruise bloomed across her cheekbone. Someone in town had thrown a stone. Maybe a word. She didn't wake when he stepped near, didn't startle when he lifted her in his arms. Just sighed, like sleep was the only safe thing she had left. He set her on the old cot in the tack room, left water and a blanket, then walked out into the dark with the stars needling overhead like pinpricks in a too-thin sky. In the morning, she was still there. She didn't ask to stay. Just swept the porch and washed the tin dishes by the pump. When Wade rode out to check his cattle, she packed him bread and dried meat, wrapping it in a clean cloth she found in a drawer. He said nothing. But the next day, he built a fire in the hearth and left the door unlatched. Bit by bit, the house began to change. There was stew simmering in the cast iron pot. A daisy in a chipped jar on the windowsill. His boots by the door were lined up instead of scattered. She hummed as she worked. Not songs from the chapel, but old lullabies with no words, just soft melody and breath. He watched her sometimes, through the cracked frame of the kitchen door. She moved like someone trying not to wake the past. Gentle. Careful. He saw how she stroked the mare's nose before feeding her, how she brushed the dust from the rafters with her apron tied tight around her waist. He didn't know what to do with her presence, only that the silence in his house no longer howled. The town didn't stay quiet long. Martha cornered him at the feed store. "You sure you want to carry her shame with your name?" she asked, voice low. He didn't answer. Just looked out toward the ridge, where the wind always bent the grass like a whisper leaning in. Pastor Green, during Sunday sermon, took aim without names. Some women come back from sin with their eyes low and their stomachs empty. But even then, the Lord sees. Clara wasn't in the pews. She never sat among them again. But later that week, Wade stood beside her in the general store. She was picking out coffee and beans, her eyes down, her fingers twitching like they expected to be slapped. And then Wade did something he hadn't done since his wife died 3 years before. He touched Clara's back. Just a hand, steady, warm, and brief. Like saying I see you without speaking. The room went still. Even the floorboards seemed to hold their breath. She turned to him then, eyes wide not with fear, but with something older than hope. She opened her mouth to speak, then froze. Because standing in the doorway, sun behind him like a halo of judgment, was Sheriff Judd Barlow. And beside him, in his hand, was a folded note torn from the pastor's study. A list of names. A date circled in red. And hers was at the top. Wade's fingers twitched once at his side. Then curled into a fist. The rain came fast that night, sharp as nails, loud as guilt. Wade sat in the doorway of his ranch house, hat low, watching the clouds spill like they couldn't bear their weight anymore. Behind him, the fire cracked and hissed. In his hand, he held the note the sheriff left, now damp from his grip. The list had 3 names. 2 had already been dragged before the town for judgment: public repentance, forced apology, exile in everything but word. The 3rd name, circled in red, was Clara's. He didn't ask what it meant. He didn't have to. Inside, Clara sat at the table, silent, peeling potatoes with the edge of a dull knife. Her hands were quick but cautious, like the act required all her focus. Wade watched her for a long moment. Her braid hung loose over one shoulder, frayed at the end. She looked so small in his late wife's old shawl. "They'll come for you," he said. She didn't look up. "They already have." He set the paper on the table between them. She didn't touch it. Her voice barely lifted. "I'm not pregnant. I know. I wouldn't lie about something like that. I didn't think you would." Silence yawned between them. The fire cracked again. Wade stared at the woman in front of him, the woman who spoke so rarely but had turned his house from a tomb into something like a breathing thing. She stood suddenly, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'll go," she said. "Tonight. If I leave now, I can make it to Hollow Creek by morning." "No." She looked at him then. Really looked. "You don't owe me anything. I know." Her throat bobbed, and she turned toward the door, brushing past him, the storm's wind slipping inside like a cold finger. He reached out. His hand caught her wrist, not rough, not pleading. Just there. "I lost a child once," he said. "And a wife. All in one night." Her eyes softened, but he wasn't done. "I didn't speak for months after that. Not to God, not to a soul. And when I did, it was to a horse." A ghost of a smile tugged at her lips. "I've seen the worst of grief," he whispered. "But I've never seen someone walk through fire like you and still offer bread with both hands." Her breath hitched. The storm outside swallowed the silence between them. "You're not a burden," he said. "You're the first thing that's felt alive around here in 3 damn years." She stepped closer, and for a moment, her hand hovered near his chest, fingers twitching like she wanted to touch him, but didn't dare. "If I stay," she whispered, "they'll call you weak. Say you've lost your mind." "Let 'em," he said. She looked down. "They won't stop." "No," he agreed. "They won't. But you'll stand with me anyway." "I already am." She didn't cry. She didn't collapse into him. She just nodded, as if his answer stitched something closed inside her. That night, she slept in the main bedroom for the first time. Not because of love, not because of want, but because Wade carried her bag into the room and set it down like a declaration. He didn't touch her. Just closed the door behind her gently and lit the lamp outside like a guardian. Morning came soft and gray. The town was already buzzing. Martha came first. "I heard what they're planning," she said, stepping off her mule with fire in her eyes. "A church trial. Public shame. They're calling it moral correction." Wade didn't flinch. "We'll be ready. They'll say she seduced you. That she came here with wicked intent." "I know what she came with," he said. "It wasn't wicked. It was empty hands and courage." Martha nodded once, and pulled a jar of jam from her bag. "Give her this. Remind her some of us still remember who she was before they named her anything else." That night, Wade found Clara sitting by the fire, the jar untouched beside her. "I heard them outside," she said, laughing. "One said I'd be gone before harvest. I'm not letting them take you." She stared into the flames. "What if staying ruins you?" He kneeled beside her, pulling a worn silver ring from his pocket. "This was my mother's. It's been in a drawer for years. I don't know what it means anymore, but I want you to have it." Clara didn't move. He set it on the floor beside her. "You don't have to wear it. You don't even have to answer. I just want you to know, what they call sin, I call survival." She didn't cry, but her hand trembled when it picked up the ring. 2 days later, the town gathered under the shadow of the church. The sun glared down without mercy. Pastor Green stood at the pulpit, holding his list like a holy relic. The sheriff stood nearby, arms crossed, jaw tight. Clara stood at Wade's side, head high, eyes calm. "Clara May Hollis," the pastor began, "you are called here to—" "She's not here for your judgment," Wade said. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "You call her sinful, but I've seen more grace in her silence than in all your sermons." The pastor's mouth opened, closed. "She's staying," Wade said, voice low and even. "And if any man thinks to raise hand or stone against her, he'll answer to me." The sheriff didn't speak, but he stepped back. Clara didn't look at anyone. She reached for Wade's hand, just barely brushing his fingers. The pastor turned red, then pale. "Then let it be on your conscience," he muttered, folding the list. That night, Clara stood in the garden they hadn't planted yet. The soil was dry, cracked like an old wound. She dug one row with her bare hands, then another. Wade came out carrying seeds. "You don't have to start tonight." "I do," she said. "I need to believe something will grow here." He knelt beside her, pressing the seeds into her palm. "It already has." They worked in silence, side by side, until the stars came out. And just as she was turning to go back inside, Wade took her hand. Not tentative, not forced. Just sure. She stopped, eyes searching his face. "I meant what I said," he murmured. "I know," she replied. Then her free hand drifted to her belly. "Slow. Phil." She didn't speak, but her eyes said everything. And in that moment Wade didn't move. Didn't breathe. Because it wasn't just rumor anymore. And for the first time since the storm began, he smiled.